The old Blackwood schoolhouse stood at the edge of town like a forgotten memory. It had once been a place of laughter and learning. Now it was silent. Weeds choked the once bright playground. The windows were boarded up like sightless eyes. Locals said the school was haunted. They whispered about Miss Thompson, a kind teacher who vanished one stormy night. No one knew what had happened to her. Some said she had run away. Others claimed she was still inside the schoolhouse, searching for something she had lost. The story of Miss Thompson had been passed down through generations. Each telling added a new layer of fear and intrigue. Over time, the schoolhouse became a place to avoid. It was a stark reminder of unanswered questions and lingering mysteries. The building itself seemed to sigh in the wind. It was as if the very walls held their breath, guarding the secrets within. Alex, Jamie, and Sam were best friends. They lived for adventure, especially the kind that sent shivers down their spines. So when Alex dared them to spend a night in the old Blackwood schoolhouse, Jamie and Sam couldn't resist. Jamie, despite his fear, tried to appear brave. Sam, always up for a challenge, readily agreed. "Are you chicken?" Alex had taunted, knowing Jamie's weakness for spooky stories. Jamie shook his head, trying to appear nonchalant. "Of course not. It's just an old building." Sam, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, "We should probably bring some flashlights and maybe a camera to document any ghosts." The plan was set. They would meet at dusk, armed with flashlights and their courage. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town, the three friends made their way to the abandoned schoolhouse. Each step brought them closer to the unknown. The closer they got, the more real the stories seemed to become. The air grew colder, as if an icy hand had gripped the town. Even the birdsong seemed to fade, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The front door creaked open with a groan, as if protesting their intrusion. The air inside was stale and thick with dust. Cobwebs hung like ghostly curtains in the dim light. The air was heavy with the smell of decay, and the silence was broken only by the sound of their own breathing. Alex ran his hand along the dusty surface of a forgotten globe. The continents were outlined in faded colors, a reminder of a world outside these crumbling walls. Jamie shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around him. He felt a cold draft, even though all the windows were boarded shut. Sam, ever the explorer, wandered down a hallway. His flashlight beam danced across peeling paint and cracked floorboards. The shadows seemed to twist and turn, taking on sinister shapes. They passed by classrooms, their desks piled high with moldy books and forgotten assignments. The air was thick with the ghosts of forgotten lessons and the echoes of children's laughter. The silence was unsettling. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hum with unspoken words and unseen presences. It felt as if they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. They entered what was once Miss Thompson's classroom. The chalkboard was still hanging on the wall, though covered in a thick layer of dust. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a screech. They turned to see the chalk moving across the chalkboard as if guided by an unseen hand. A chill ran down their spines. Alex, Jamie, and Sam watched in stunned silence as the chalk moved, its ghostly scratching the only sound in the room. Jamie's eyes widened in fear, his breath catching in his throat. Alex, though equally terrified, couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline. This was the adventure he had been craving. Sam, ever practical, tried to rationalize what they were seeing. "It's probably just a rat," he said, his voice trembling slightly, but deep down, he knew it was something more. The chalk continued to move, slowly forming letters on the board. The message was chilling in its simplicity. "Help us," it read. The chalk clattered to the floor, leaving a fine cloud of dust hanging in the air. The silence returned, heavier and more oppressive than before. The message hung in the air, a plea from beyond the grave. The room grew noticeably colder. Then the door slammed shut with a resounding boom. They were trapped. Panic welled up inside them, threatening to consume their courage. As they whirled around, they saw her. A translucent figure shimmered in the dim light. It was Miss Thompson. She looked as if she had stepped out of time. Her long dress flowed around her like mist. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Who's there?" Jamie whispered, his voice trembling. Miss Thompson turned her sorrowful eyes towards them. "I have been waiting for you," she said, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to weave through the air. "You have come to help, haven't you?" Alex, though still afraid, found his voice. "We saw your message," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "What do you need help with?" Miss Thompson's ghostly form floated closer, her eyes fixed on them. Her gaze was filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "My students," Miss Thompson whispered, her voice filled with sadness. "They're trapped here, lost in the storm that took me." She reached out a spectral hand, her touch sending shivers down their spines. "Please, find them and set them free." Alex, emboldened by a surge of courage, stepped forward. He looked into the ghost's sorrowful eyes and made a promise. "We'll help them, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice firm despite his fear. "We promise." Jamie and Sam, inspired by Alex's bravery, nodded in agreement. Miss Thompson's form shimmered, a look of gratitude spreading across her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "They are lost and afraid. Find them, and this schoolhouse will find peace once more." As quickly as she had appeared, she vanished. The only evidence of her presence was the lingering chill in the air. The chalkboard still displayed her plea, "Help us." The words seemed to burn themselves into their minds. They had made a promise to a ghost. Now they had to figure out how to keep it. Section 7. The search begins. The door creaked open as if releasing them from a spell. They wasted no time in fleeing the room, their hearts pounding in their chests. But they didn't run from the schoolhouse, not yet. They had a promise to keep. Determined, they set out to search the schoolhouse. They scoured every classroom, every nook and cranny. The halls were silent, save for the sound of their own footsteps and the beating of their hearts. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by their whispered words and the rustling of their jackets. They checked the dusty library with its shelves of forgotten books. They peeked into the empty gymnasium, its floor covered in a thick layer of dust. They even ventured into the dark and creepy basement with its musty smell and cobweb-covered pipes. But the missing students were nowhere to be found. The schoolhouse held its secrets close, refusing to give up its ghosts easily. Discouraged but not defeated, they gathered in the hallway, their flashlights casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Where could they be?" Jamie whispered, his voice filled with concern. Section 8. The Lost Students. As they stood there, a faint sound reached their ears. It was a soft humming, barely audible above the creaking of the old building. They followed the sound, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The humming led them back to Miss Thompson's classroom. The humming was coming from a small forgotten cupboard in the corner of the room. It was tucked behind a bookshelf, its door slightly ajar. Alex cautiously approached the cupboard and slowly opened the door. Inside, they found a dusty old book. As Alex opened the book, a gust of wind swept through the room, swirling the dust into a miniature cyclone. When the dust settled, they saw them. Standing in the middle of the room were several translucent figures. They were children dressed in old-fashioned clothing. The children were smiling, their eyes filled with a joy that transcended the boundaries of life and death. They reached out their hands, their touch as light as a feather. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices as soft as the rustling of leaves. "You set us free." Section 9. Peace at last. As the children faded away, the schoolhouse seemed to sigh, as if releasing a burden it had carried for far too long. The temperature rose, chasing away the lingering chill. The air felt lighter, as if cleansed by an unseen force. The humming stopped, replaced by a peaceful silence. They had fulfilled their promise to Miss Thompson. The lost students were free, and the schoolhouse could finally rest. Leaving the book on Miss Thompson's desk, they made their way out of the schoolhouse and into the night. The stars seemed to shine brighter, as if celebrating the release of innocent souls. As they walked away, they could almost hear the faint sound of children's laughter echoing in the wind. The Blackwood schoolhouse no longer felt menacing. It stood bathed in the soft glow of the moon, its secrets laid to rest. And somewhere they knew, Miss Thompson and her students were finally reunited. Know you've been a good friend. Section 10. The Blackwood Schoolhouse Today. The Blackwood Schoolhouse still stands at the edge of town, but it's no longer a place of fear and dread. The town rallied around the story told by Alex, Jamie and Sam. They cleaned up the schoolyard, planted flowers, and even repaired some of the windows. The schoolhouse is now a community centre, a place for meetings, activities and laughter. And every year, on the anniversary of Miss Thompson's disappearance, the town holds a memorial service in her honour. They remember her kindness, her dedication to her students, and the mystery that was finally solved. Some say that if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can still hear the faint sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls of the Blackwood Schoolhouse. But it's no longer a sound that sends chills down your spine. It's a sound of joy, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope and love can prevail.